So I'd like to move now into the last organized section that we have, which talks about MAVA's closing, which I know a lot of our partners on the line are keen to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah.
I suppose the number one question, we have two key questions. The next one will come that many partners asked, in particular Jean-François Roubin from the Maison de la Rivière. You and your family have done so much for nature over the years, and the challenges are as big as ever. Why is MAVA closing?
Well, this is a fundamental question we can answer in many different ways. I'm just going to tell you the truth because I think that's the best way of dealing with these things. It's closing first and foremost because my father had the vision and the foresight of understanding that he didn't want to create himself a monument that would outlive him. MAVA is not a mausoleum where we continue to cherish the memory of my father just because he was the founder. MAVA has gone on to do the work he intended to do. He had set down a date which would be the end of operation, and this is where we're going to. And the idea of asking me as his son to mimic his doing, to constantly double guess what he would have done if I had been there, if he had been there with me, is clearly an artificial situation which does not correspond to reality. I am deeply grateful to him to have entrusted MAVA to my two sisters and I, and we are going to do the best that we can do outside of MAVA, just as much as we did it within MAVA. MAVA is not going to continue, and that's a deliberate attempt at trying to separate the inheritance of my father from what we are doing in today's world. And I think it's important to understand that. We all are, of course, completely passionate by nature. I mean, those of you who know my two sisters know that in their respective foundation, they are doing some great work which has to do with environment, which has to do with nature, and which has to do with the limits of the planet, which is something we're all confronted with. So I think it's important to understand that they all have, I and my sisters have answers to this question, which are not the same ones as what MAVA is. So there will not be a MAVA 2.0. That will not happen. And we will continue our journey doing other things with probably other people. And I think it's important to really understand that. We will not pursue the same set of priority. Biodiversity protection and protected area work in general has been very successful thanks to you, all our partners, but it is not something we're going to focus on. And I think it's important to understand that. And by the way, this is not a surprise. We've told you a long time ago that we're going to stop. And we've actually set up a program which allows you to identify how you can reinforce the way you function post-MAVA. I really do think that it's time, and thank you, Linda, for giving me the opportunity to do that. Yeah, I really do think it's time that we say that absolutely unequivocally. The amount of money, I think it's more than 50 million Swiss francs, we've invested into helping you to develop after us is because we mean it. There is not going to be a MAVA 2.0, and MAVA will stop there. I don't know how I could reply to Jean-François much more clearly than this. François, it's important that you realize that the future will have to be without us. There you go.
Thank you, André. So when you look at all of the years that MAVA has been doing things, and particularly this last phase where we've been working so intensively towards some specific outcomes and results, what are some of the things or one thing that makes you the most proud when you think of what MAVA has been doing?
Having been a witness of the last 10 years, I can tell you the MAVA of today is a trillion years ahead of what it was 10 years ago. For me, the real legacy, and we're talking about the inheritance of my father, for me, the real legacy is to be able to create a cohort of people who are willing to continue to face these challenges going ahead. We have helped, and I don't think it's immodest to say that, we have helped a whole generation of conservation leaders who understand leadership in the way we discussed it before, to enter into the conservation field and to make a significant difference in what conservation is all about. We don't preserve nature because it's beautiful, although it is. We conserve nature because we need it, because it's part of our living sphere. It's as we said before, the life support system on Earth. And to be able to do this consistently in the right geographies, we need people like you. And for me to put the key under the mat is only possible because I know that you guys are there and you guys are going to continue to do the right thing with other partners, with other federations, but you are our legacy. And I feel this very strongly every single time I have the privilege of meeting one of you guys in the field. This is the world will not change just because philanthropy pushes money into it. The world will change because people are going to make a difference. And so if you have been able to light a couple of candles, if you've been able to light a couple of fuses and to make sure that the world is better looked after, I would be very proud of this. That for me would look like success. And at the moment it does, because a lot of you guys have gone on to do things which can only be described as admirable. So thank you. Our legacy is you.
Excellent, thanks. I have a question from Michael Kamps from GOB Menorca, who asks whether you have any thoughts on how conservation organizations can attract funding.
So that's an absolutely... it's a question on which I've spent quite a lot of time thinking. I participated twice to a conference called the Business of Conservation. How can you, business as a force of good, how can you bring positive cash flows to conservation? And I can see at the moment our list of solutions is very, very small. If you want to protect a beautiful place, protect it, a reserve, a nature reserve, a park somewhere, so far really only tourism has been part of the solution. You select a couple of people, and I insist on what select, because of course you don't want mass tourism, you want high-end type of tourism, and that can create a sort of positive cash flow, which sadly often doesn't stay in the reserve, but goes somewhere in the city, in the bank account. So at the moment, the only way we can address this is this notion of the distinction between public good and private good. Difficult to generate an income for a private organization by using other people's ownership. The example is the example of the tuna. The last tuna fished in the Mediterranean will make the fishermen rich and everybody else is poor. And so how do we translate that to the funding model of NGOs? We need, as we said before, to make sure that the issue you're trying to support is an issue that really matters. I think that in the long term, philanthropy cannot be the solution because it's too small, there's not enough money around, and B, it's not sustainable. At some stage, as we see with MAVA, the funding will stop and you will have to work out something else. Now, we can hope that there is an ongoing generations of foundation and funders who will come in to provide more fresh money, but that's a bit of a risky thing to do. I mean, it might well be that this is not it's not a really stable way of constructing. So I do hope that society will realize the importance of nature, and I come back to what we were saying before. We need to put a value to it, so that we can find a societal way of funding this. So my advice would be, don't focus just on philanthropy, try to find an institutional solution. And I'm afraid that very often means try to talk to governments, which for a non-governmental organization is a bit difficult to do.
I have one more question for you, and then we'll go to the questions from the audience. I've seen lots and lots of them coming through, so we'll try to leave time for that. So the last question is, as we approach 2022, when MAVA will stop funding and we're going to end, what does success look like?
Well, I touched on it early on about, what are we going to leave behind and who are the people we're going to leave behind and how they're going to be able to make a difference. But in terms of definition, of course, success looks like natural system which is reinforced and which has a certain amount of independence towards decision makers. We need to reevaluate the contribution of natural system to our presence on the planet. This is not a question of, as we said before, nature bad, the rest good, or the opposite. It's a question of all collectively being able to move the needle. So the success for MAVA will be to have made a lasting contribution to the prosperity of humanity into the place in which we were. The reason we protect fishes in West Africa is not because we want the fishes to survive. It's because we want the result of their fisheries to be shared equally among everybody in a sustainable manner for the long term. So the impact on local systems is an important one. And for me, success would be that MAVA is recognized as somebody who's not necessarily protecting nature against people, but somebody with some institution which will help to protect nature because of people and with people. And that's a major difference with a number of other foundations. We've always integrated local partners. We've always integrated all the people who are listening today. And I think that's a very important contribution. We are not a donor which comes in because they know better. We are a donor who comes in because we want to do things together. And that for me is very important.
And just a follow-up comment on that, can you say something about the community we're trying to build?
Yes, I mean, like-minded people who work together for the sort of targets we just defined to create a community. And I was talking before about the efforts that MAVA is doing to create some sort of sustainability after our departure. The best way of doing this is to create a group of partners who can work together and who can continue to work together once MAVA per se is no longer there. I cannot give any specific example just now, but it strikes me that there's an awful lot of example where our outcome action plans, in every single region, have brought people together who did not really talk so much before, and who have now a common vision of what is needed to protect the systems. And I'm deliberately trying not to use environment all the time, because it's more than that. It's just the way things articulated function. And the rebuilding post-COVID will be made by people who are able to put nature and natural solution in the front. And these people have to have the flexibility to be able to understand that this is not just about saving one bird or saving one wetland. It's about more than that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.